they had this small company mindset that would say, we can make an outboard motor and we're gonna sell it.
Yeah,
And then we're gonna make another outboard motor and we're gonna sell it.
yeah,
You know, they had that kind of mindset that we have this, whole machine shop, we're all tooled up, let's just see what happens. And
Yeah.
we'll make what we make with the staff we have, the size of the company we have, and make a few bucks off it.
yeah. Sell the design, license.
So it wasn't a
That's-
production facility, basically. It was they were handmade.
Yeah, they're
Pretty
all,
much.
they're all
If they're
different.
only
Everyone
320.
is a bit different too.
Yeah,
I mean, if you
okay.
really look at it.
Yeah.
There's small, little, subtle differences that, yeah.
And why buy a carburetor when you can buy one from Tillotson for probably less money than you can make one?
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And
they-
it works better.
Yeah,
So-
are we on now?
Yeah, you're on, but
Okay,
I'm,
fine.
this,
So when
this
did we
discussion.
say, before we move early, when did we say, Bill, when did the last 29 roll off the line, would we say? The last 29 motor produced by Hartford, produced by Gray and Pryor.
Yeah,
I want to say, what is it, middle of August of 29?
right, so the last one was, August 15th.
Yeah,
Oh, no, sorry, August 23rd.
okay. So
And
that's
that-
important talking
And
about.
that's 97 of 29, and that went to Barton. And I think I was able to find that someplace, who Barton was a distributor or something for them. Because the name appears more than once on this list.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's interesting in that, going back to your comments about when Gray and Pryor stopped and when Indian Motorcycle started production, that time frame, it was really from towards the end, third week of August, of 29
Yeah.
to when they actually rolled them out was a big leap, especially
it's-
after the market crashed.
It's very likely, the scenario you talked about, it's very likely that they could have got a head start.
Yeah,
You wouldn't think that, all of a sudden, one day in October of 1929, that this whole deal happened just that one day.
that wouldn't be how it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, we're going from a one-off shop to a full-line production facility.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So there were, just over 300 Hartfords made, 310. There's some loose ends. There's some notes where they just sent power heads to Siam. And so I don't know what those guys did in Siam, but they probably did
Ran the
use.
wrong oil.
Yeah, they probably ran them with
So
all-
how many Indians were made?
Yes, so that was the next point that I wanted to talk about is Indian increased the production, and we're thinking about 1,500.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more Indians than
Yes,
there are.
a lot more.
Oh,
for sure,
okay.
Right. Indian started with serial number 1001. And even though I know this pre-production number 41, which I've seen and have lots of pictures of it, the real production numbers were starting with 1001.
Okay.
I know of 1001, and I know of a few that are in the single numbers. And then we know of some that are as high as, 2,500 or something like that, in that range. I don't know exactly.
I got a little story that comes to mind
Yeah.
about the Indians. Typically, when you find an antique outboard, this is when Palmer and this is probably back in the 80s, and Palmer was buying up anything and everything there was, and Palmer was into Indians, and he got a couple of them, and he and I used to talk a lot about this stuff, and I'm looking at them and saying, wow, these are amazing. They've got propellers that aren't even banged up, both of them. And I couldn't understand for the life of me, because propellers were usually the first thing you had to find with an engine that had any time at all on it. And he got these two, and they were different years, different condition. One of them was frozen solid, had been left outside, but the propeller was like brand new. And I said, wow, yeah, this is pretty awesome. And then, of course, as time went on, I think we got one of them running, and I was like, this thing, I don't know, it doesn't seem to run very good. It didn't start well. Of course, it's back a long time ago. Palmer used to spend a lot of money on having coils rewound and stuff. A guy named King in Massachusetts used to do a beautiful job on them. And And that was kind of my first introduction to Indians, and I kind of really questioned the fact that the props look like brand new.
Yeah. Well, I guess some maybe didn't start so easy, but I can say that I know the two outboards that you're talking about, and I fixed them both, and they run quite well. One I put new pistons in, and the other one had good original pistons.
He got some later on. Those were two.
Okay.
These were these.
Well, anyway,
Palmer used to buy and sell and trade a lot
Yeah,
of stuff.
The two I've worked on,
One of them might have been one of the ones that I remember.
maybe, yeah. Anyway, in fact, he came to a meet with one, and he ran it. He put it on a boat and ran it.
Right.
You know, so I was pleased with that. So, you know, there's some little features about these, and these are to some people probably some of the boring details, but it's important that we will talk about those. This first one, number 4 of 1927, has an Eisman magneto, whereas all the newer ones were Bosch mags. And the other thing that was odd about this one was that, and you can just barely see that boss and plug on the tank. That's where the original fuel line came out of. It's a 1/8 pipe,
Okay, I think we can see it.
and
yeah.
there was
Yeah.
probably a shut-off cock that you can't reach, or it gets
Not something you want to turn off while the engine was running.
Yeah, right. So anyway, the line came down, and the original engines had their own carburetors, and nobody's ever seen one other than a picture in the brochure. It looked like a barrel valve, almost like a Johnson type carburetor, and for some reason that didn't last, and it immediately got changed to this Tillotson type, which was available in 1927. And it was the same one used on the Model T Speedy Twin. The other feature that these things had, the early ones, they had a vane-type water pump in the nose cone.
Really?
Yeah.
Metal vane type?
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure it was metal, but you can see where it's been plugged off.
Okay.
So at some point, I'm sure the...
In other words, the intake was where this nose cone is?
Yes. Yep,
Okay.
it was an open hole.
And it had a pipe going up inside? Kind of like that.
No, it just had a rotor with a vein in it that ran in the aluminum housing.
Kind of like that Thor. There's a Thor there that's got the metal vane type right behind the propeller. It's a vane.
Is it a vein?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
anyway, so it's similar to that.
Okay.
And for some reason, they changed them out right away. This one actually, you can tell had a pump in it because the aluminum's all scored up.
Okay.
You can see it. So they quickly made a change, and
Did they have internal piping or external piping?
internal. No, it was all internal. So they had to quickly change, and they must have had 100 of these lower units already cast.
I gotcha.
So they had to quickly rework them and weld on an aluminum scoop
Okay.
and add a clamp-on anti-cad
Oh, I see. There's
plate.
a scoop. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you rotate that propeller just a little bit? There we go. Good. Right there.
Yeah.
You can see the scoop. All right.
Bill, were all the 27s, all the early first year have the clamp-on cavitation plate versus the
Oh,
cast-in?
even well into 28.
Well, the 28.
I had number 104 28, and that still had a clamp-on plate. It had a plugged nose cone, and it had this welded-on scoop. So, yeah, it was well along in their production. They struggled with that, and the other piece that changed was the addition of these support struts. Many of these were made without that, and evidently the tanks kept breaking off. They're cast aluminum tanks, and they're only bolted in 3 places, and people must have broke those off easily, and so they had to add these struts, and how they did it is they took the existing cast aluminum tank, drilled a hole, and made a bolt that would go through with a center hole, 1/4-20 center hole, and with a gasket behind the bolt head and tightening these nuts, you got a leak-free arrangement. But with 2 places for 1/4 screws.
Are those aluminum bolts?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So you'll see it here. They still had tanks that they had to fix and rework.
Yeah,
That
you don't
one,
see it
by
there.
1929, they changed the pattern to have an internal thick enough boss to add a 1/4
I
screw.
noticed also that the supports are quite a bit thicker on this early one.
Yeah, probably, huh? Yeah. And Indian had them, but you can see the Indian, it's a different shape. They said, oh, well, and on this engine, they missed the spark plug. Let's see if we can make it closer to the spark plug. Anyway, I don't know why they did that, but for some reason, they did that.
Very close.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very, very close. Wow. Yeah, with the wrong connector,
way
you
to
were
go,
hitting.
huh? Way
Yeah.
So this early one, other than that, of course, the muffler this is the earliest style muffler, the round can. And there's some other little differences. The crankcase on these earlier ones have a smaller passage. And I don't know if we have if you look at the Indian,
It seems like the clearance is quite a bit greater on the manifold here than over there.
well, yeah, it's a different casting. This pivot is a different casting, so maybe
Okay.
it's a little bit lower. I don't know. But these earlier ones have the crankcase cast-in intake passage is smaller than the later ones.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's an
see it,
Indian.
Ron? Whoops.
See how much bigger, how deep that is. So it's much.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Now that Hartford that you tested, that's the 104, had the big passages in it on the
Did it?
crankcase. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
That one that I did my test
Yes,
on?
that one, right. It had the good iron cylinders and the crankcase with the really big.
So
passages.
what's the difference? So you said that was a 104. That was a newer version than this.
But I think it had a replacement crankcase, even though it had a real Hartford legit serial number. But I think it had been fixed, probably at the factory.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So when did they go to that bigger? You said that's just
Well, let me see. Do we have it in?
Indian doesn't have. Oh yeah, that's deeper.
Indian has it.
Yeah. So even this 29 still has the shallow
But the breathing in this one's.
more.
So that engine that I tested really wasn't a stock engine.
No.
Huh.
No. In fact, the other interesting thing is if you look at well, Eric had the crankcase. So you see the tank support on this
Yeah.
Indian crankcase?
Yeah.
Well, the Hartfords had a teeny weeny one. But for some reason,
Yeah. A lot smaller and shorter. Yeah.
that Hartford number 104 not only had the big intake passage, but it had that big tank support, which is almost more like an Indian part. But it had original Hartford serial number on the crankcase.
Really?
Yeah.
So what do you suppose is going
I'm
on?
going to guess that somebody blew it up and bought a crankcase from Indian and put a Hartford number on it. Graham Pryor rebuilt it or something. There's nothing in the records that indicate that, but it had to have been what happened.
Bill, on the 27 with the Iceman mag, it's a different flywheel as well.
Same flywheel as the 72T
So
Lockwood.
is
The
it the
mag plate has got a different hole size for where the mag fits on the neck by only a little.
So it's not a Lockwood flywheel now, is it? Is it other manufacturer? But it's this.
Oh, it's Eisman. It's the same.
It's the same.
Eisman, like Phelon, they sold the whole package,
Oh,
the
yeah.
flywheel
Yeah.
with the ignition
mag
system.
plate, everything ready to
Okay.
go, and they serial number as such as well.
Wow.
Yeah, you'll see often that
Yeah,
even
they had
the
serial
Chief
numbers. Yeah.
with a serial number on the flywheel and a matching number on the plate. Yeah.
When did they stop with the iron cylinders? When in production? When did that stop?
Well, that 104 I was talking about had the iron cylinders.
Mhm.
And the mystery to that, which we'll never know completely, is that, well, if it's got a replacement crankcase, why didn't somebody put the new cylinders on it? But it must have been decided that the cylinders that were on it were perfectly fine. So that's how that one got to be kind of an odd one with iron cylinders and a late crankcase. But I don't know when the last iron cylinder one was made. But sometime in the let's say mid 1928.
Okay.
Yeah. The thesis talks about some of that. Well, a little bit, shows pictures. The thesis. So Robert Gray Jr. went to MIT, and part of the
Talking about the sun now that you knew,
yes,
right?
went to
Okay.
MIT, and his thesis was high-speed brakes. So basically, they made dynamometers, and I didn't say
Dynamometer.
dynamometers, as part of their thesis, and they tested skin friction
Okay.
versus more of an impeller type. And anyway, the thesis explains it, and they talk about the two different engines that they had used. One of which, and actually there's that's the engine lab at MIT, Cambridge,
Okay.
Mass. And
Is that still the same? The engine lab at MIT.
well, it doesn't have
Is
this.
that an original? Does it still look like that?
I don't know. I haven't
okay.
been.
All right.
I did spend time in Cambridge. I mean, I rode my bicycle all over MIT and
Okay.
Harvard, but I never got into that area. This one shows aluminum cylinders, and it shows what I call the mid-20s oval exhaust manifold, just prior to this one with the underwater exhaust. But number 104 that we've been talking a lot about had this oval muffler on it.
That one I tested
one you
had
tested
it? Did
had
it
this-
really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't remember.
This one shows that carburetor, the earlier style carburetor, with the knurled or the
Okay.
rotary choke.
Rotary choke, yeah.
And there's talk in this thesis about two different Hartfords that they played with, and one of them was one of them they said was an earlier one, and they talk about at some point they got, and that one didn't produce very much horsepower.
Okay.
It said in here it only developed like 6 or 7 horsepower at 3,500 RPM. I mean, it's all in here. But they talk about getting another one for the test that had a bigger expansion chamber.
Yeah.
Okay, and it talked about a bigger expansion, and it also had 40 hours running time on it.
Yeah, they talked about that a lot, the
Yeah,
running
right.
in. Yeah.
And made, in this thesis, they talk about they also compared it to a Johnson K35, like the one you
Okay.
talked about over here. So there's K35 information in here as well. And there was a thesis, it says here, it would be interesting, however, to compare this engine roughly with the Johnson double opposed motor, which was subject to the thesis by Francis and Dean in 1928. Their motor was slightly smaller than ours, piston displacement of 17.3 cubic inches, whereas the motor used in this thesis both had the piston displacement of 19.7 cubic inches. And the Johnson motor, 6.65 horse at 3,800 RPM. The Hartford motor, running the same conditions, produced only 6.72 horsepower at 4,400 RPM, which is sounds
Negligible.
way low. Now, the 1929 model Hartford motor with the same piston displacement but with extra large expansion chambers, which would have been these, and underwater exhaust gave 10.3 horsepower at 4,300 RPM. This, however, this motor had been run in a boat for about 40 hours being put on the test block. Anyway, so there's really interesting stuff. And thanks to Robert Gray, who did that thesis at MIT.